What's going on, YouTube? So, of course, with the upcoming release came Ultimate Blair. Outside of Blair, the best thing that we got was this lovely bouncing ball emote, which I'm sure will be fantastic when physics of jiggling come in a month. I'll start with basic Blair, minus all of the modules. Blair, in large part, is just going to be a critical hit descendant. This means that you're going to build for crit rate and crit damage on the majority of his builds. There is one where it turns him into a gun descendant. I will be going over this in a separate video entirely because it's a whole different archetype. You're going to have different guns that you should equip, different skill trees, stuff like that. And it's going to be in an entirely different video. I also am regretfully to inform you that I have to go grind my life away for weapon course for that video, but I digress. Starting off with Blair's passive, his Hitmaster, this gives him a critical hit damage increase of an inherent 10% on the character. You don't have to do anything for this increase, it's just there. And then there are flame zones that come with playing Blair. The flame zones look like this, and each flame zone up to a maximum of 5 will increase your critical hit rate by 5%. This, of course, gets applied to the base critical hit rate, which I have an addition to in my Arche Tuning. So as you can see, I have a default 26. Whenever I equip the critical hit rate modules, I will have a 200% increase in critical hit rate. This will take the 26 and bring it up to a 50. So all I have to do is get my maximum critical hit rate to 50 itself and then double it. So I won't be needing a skill insight for any of Blair's builds. All I'm going to need is emergency measures and front lines to increase the critical hit rate to 100%, provided that I play Blair correctly. His fourth ability, Deadly Cuisine. It is a very slow animated fireball that spawns its own pools, and you get 3 pools from base Blair. So theoretically, you'd only have to spawn 2 pools and then activate the ultimate to double your critical hit rate. Due to the fact that you have to spam a whole bunch of skills, you will be needing cooldown maxed on Blair. There is a best way to do it, and then some other ways that you can go about doing it while you wait for the development of your character. The third ability, Burn Taste. He creates a flamethrower. The flamethrower ticks every 0.3 seconds and has a duration of 4.5. So 4.5 divided by 0.3 is how many ticks of damage you'll get out of base Blair. The second ability, Extinguish, sucks up a maximum of 5 pools of fire. Whenever Blair first came out, this would extinguish the fire pools, and you would lose the fire pools. But now it doesn't do that, so now you just get 5 stacks of aggressive flavor, which will give you an increase of 30% skill power modifier. A movement speed increase of 25% will happen for 10 seconds after you use Extinguish. So if you don't want to be a slog and slogging through the swamp, you should always have Extinguish activated if you can. The first ability, Blaze Up, it just gives you a fire pool. The fire pools are predicated on, of course, your build, but the base duration is 15 seconds. In my opinion, Blair is built best for AoE descendant capabilities with a sort of pocket for boss damage. I do not think Blair is best for bossing, although he can boss just fine. You're just not going to be comparing the leaderboards with some of the other descendants. The Transcendent modules, I have a couple that I'm going to go over. I'll start with Incendiary Bomb because it is in fact the worst one. The fire pools, all it does is let you throw your fire pool. This isn't terrible, it's just not nearly as good as any of the other modules. So I say it's the worst one. The first build I'll go over is the truly Deadly Cuisine. The good thing about the builds with Blair is that the majority of all of the builds are going to be the same. It's just going to be maximum cooldown with maximum crit with 1 HP module, 1 range, and 1 duration module. And that is because you want range and duration both so that you can keep up your procs and just set everything on fire. Truly Deadly Cuisine turns his fourth ability from the giant fireball with pool setters into a skill power modifier of 12,000. This skill power modifier of 12,000 will give you almost 8 times the damage of the giant fireball in the first one, but you don't get the explosions from these small fireballs. Keep in mind, it is 3 times 2.4 plus 1.6. That will give you the total damage of the fireball from Deadly Cuisine, provided that your range is big enough to actually hit the monster with all of them. But the big difference here is the cooldown. The cooldown goes from 120 seconds to 70 seconds, so it's very easily spammable on the truly deadly cuisine build. But the bad part about it is that you don't get the pools from the fireball itself, so you're going to have to just keep your first ability procced all the time. Honestly, a slightly inconvenient. So truly deadly cuisine is completely viable. And then you can deal plenty of damage, 36 million. You can get it more whenever you start really ticking into min-maxing your characters. The second ability I will go over is Classic Chef. Classic Chef takes the fourth ability that you have and lets you stack it up to 7 times instead of 5 times. So instead of 25%, you get 35% skill critical hit rate increase, although it doesn't actually matter too much because with the fully built build, you get 100% critical hit rate increase anyway. So you don't actually need 7 stacks. The main takeaway from the Classic Chef on the fourth ability is that now you get 5 small pools, so you actually don't have to blaze up as much. You can really just deadly cuisine everything. When it explodes, you get the pools, you soak them in, and then you can spam all of your skills as you would normally anyway. However, you are limited to a maximum of a 15-second cooldown. You can go a little bit higher, but it's really not going to make that huge of a difference. It does give you a 50% higher MP cost on the first ability though. Other than this, it's just, once again, a minor inconvenience. Classic Chef and truly deadly cuisine are very good, and I think they're completely viable, although the ultimate Blair comes with killer recipe and next level recipe, but I will go over Backdraft first just as a module. Backdraft is for weapons. It turns Blair into a weapon descendant. Instead of getting a skill critical hit rate increase, now you get a firearm critical hit rate increase. This will make you play Blair the same, except the predominant damage that you deal will come from your firearms. So this is a completely different build, and it has different slots to it. You won't need all of the Almadine slots because you won't be needing to deal skill critical hits because you won't be able to, basically. If you'll look, the small fireballs deal 2,400, and then with Deadly Cuisine on the Backdraft, they deal 600%, way less damage. You're just not really going to get that much skill damage out of Backdraft. So if you don't have guns grinded out with cores and everything like that, Backdraft probably isn't the call unless you want to put in a lot of work, and you'll have all that work to do anyway if you're just playing the game. The second ability, Extinguish, instead of you getting a skill power modifier increase, you now get a firearm attack and weak point damage increase per flame. It's basically the same concept with firearms instead. And then once again, it increases the MP cost. For the Blair Ultimate Module, Killer Recipe, this one is actually my favorite one. I like this one the most. A Feast of Flavors. This takes your default of 10% skill critical hit damage increase, and instead it gives you a skill critical hit rate increase of 25%, a critical hit damage increase of 10%, and a skill power modifier of 30%. You also get Chef's Touch. Chef's Touch is a unique resource. Below it, you will see the ticks, the orange bars, look similar to Luna's. You get 10 of them. Every time you attack or defeat an enemy inflicting with burn, you get a 50% chance to gain a bar of resource. This bar of resource annoys me to no end, but it does give Blair some pretty interesting things he can do. The Feast of Flowers gives your Deadly Feast multiple missiles, I would call them, with a max target count of 6, which means you can target up to 6 enemies. And you can see 6 enemies targeted, but you get a missile for every point that you have, despite it saying that you can only have 5 maximum missiles. The Burn Taste or Flamethrower, the third ability, this doesn't change any, but the temperature check replaces the Extinguish with a MP recovery. The MP recovery is the Chef's Touch max times 5%. So if you have a full bar of unique resources and you activate it, you will get 50% of your MP back. This does not expend your resources, so go nuts. Then the first ability, Spicy Meatball. He is actually throwing meatball missiles. It is very funny and is alike of DBZ's Kai Blasts. It sort of gets kind of confusing here. The fire count increase says every 17% of caster's duration. The 17% of caster's duration, you can think of the duration auto stopping at 100%. So whatever your duration is with a base 100%, you will take that and then you'll add whatever your skill duration is, and then you'll divide that with 17. Here I have 100% plus 36% gives me a duration of 136%. And in my Arche Tuning tree, I have an extra 6%. So I get 140 something percent divided by 17% gives me 9 meteors. There is no default. Theoretically, if you had 0% duration, you would have 0 fire count. With the killer recipe, since cooldown is so important, this is my build. I highly recommend doing your own thing, but if you want a build to copy, feel free. I focus on dimension, focus on fire for the basic damage increase, and then MP conversion and nimble fingers for maximum cooldown. The cooldown is 74.3%. Yes, you could use multi-talented, but since Arche Tuning came out, I don't need to do that to almost maximize my skill cooldown. I do have cooldown on my Reactor, so I recommend putting cooldown on your Reactor and getting the 5.5% enhanced skill cooldown bubble on the Arche Tuner, so your character is left with 0.872% cooldown. It maxes out at 90%, so you can't get anything better anyway. And then you would use a combination of your first ability and your third ability to try to get the unique resources so that you can target the enemies and nuke them with the final ability. The build that I have has been built in such a way that it's able to cycle 2 uses of the first and second ability with the final fourth ability, and you would just keep on doing that. The majority of time you're launching meteors, recovering your mana, and then launching meteors with your fourth ability. And it would go something like that inside of the heat of battle. Whenever you're having troubles getting more unique resources, you always have your third ability to fall back on. I also have a skill expansion so that you're able to hit the enemies easier with the meteorites. It's quite annoying to hit enemies with the meteorites across the map, so that's why I have skill expansion. Then skill concentration, front lines, and emergency measures are the only way to get a lot of skill critical hit damage. If you want more damage, you can use hyper focus. Hyper focus on landing a firearm critical hit, you get focus, which gives you a skill critical hit damage increase of 46% for 15 seconds. This is pretty viable inside of the game, and it's really not hard to get a skill critical hit damage. However, only one of the effects can be applied at a time, so if you're stuck with the first ability, whenever you get a skill critical hit, it will be difficult to cycle off of that for 15 seconds. So you're not going to be maximizing hyperfocus's thing the entire time. I would much rather prefer having skill expansion or skill extension. The skill extension itself gives you 3 extra balls because of the rounding. So if I don't have skill extension, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you get 6 balls. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 maybe? It is definitely worth your time for the skill extension. It is also important for the skill extension so you minimize the amount of time that you're not doing skill damage in between you waiting for your fourth ability to recharge. And that is Killer Recipe. I know I said before that Killer Recipe was my favorite, but I actually had just underutilized the next level recipe, which is controller disconnected. The next level recipe changes the first and the third ability of Blair's arsenal, and it lets you become Valby. So every time he walks, it just lights the entire zone on fire. The damage that comes off of this is not huge, but it is definitely good enough. Flame zone creation distance every 7 meters. And then the third ability, Hot Delivery, is another sort of weird one. It says the range level increase is the caster effect range 50% each. So your guy has a base range of 7 times 2 meters. This would be at a 100% range modifier. And then level 2 range would be at 150% modifier, and level 3 would be at 200% modifier. So since your character defaults to 100, then Arche Tuning gives us an extra 34%. All we need is a skill expansion to maximize it beyond 200%. You actually don't need amplification control if you have the extra points of Arche Tuning to give yourself the extra 24% skill effect range. If you don't have it, you will need amplification control on the build. And you can run 36% duration. The duration you're going to want because of how Hot Delivery works. This is the only time I'll really mention weapons. On the weapon core, it will behoove you to get sprint speed as much as possible on your weapon. The damage of the weapon doesn't really matter. Here I only have 1 sprint speed. I just won't give me the other 2 sprint speed because RNG hates me. And then I would also recommend putting sprint speed on your inversion reinforcement. And keep in mind the second ability that you have gives you a 25% sprint speed increase. So with the 25% increase of Blair and then 2 sprint speeds on your gun, you'll max out your sprint speed anyway because the maximum is 1300. And then on the third ability, the reason it's so big is because we have the 200% range increase modifier on our build in total. Otherwise, they are actually the same build, just the playstyles differ. Ultimate Blair is really fun, and I do think that they did a very good job with his inception. I'll do a Sigma sector just to demonstrate his capabilities. No, he isn't going to beat Serena right now, but that's a separate problem. Also, there's nothing you can do to make him better than Serena at this moment. You'll see the stack on the left side of the screen. It's that pool of fire countdown. You want to maintain that active all the time. And then as long as you have your fireball thing next to your list of skills at 5, you'll be getting the maximum effects of your Pitmaster ability. As long as there are 5, you'll have 100% crit rate, provided that you have all of the same Arche Tuning slots, which I'll go over after the demonstration. You also want to make sure that you also have Extinguish activated all the time, just simply because of the movement speed increase. Now, I would like to say that there's an optimal combat rotation with this, but due to the waves of battle, it would be hard to say that there is one. All in all, I do think the devs did a good job in creating Ultimate Blair, and with some balancing in the future, I think it'll be pretty dope. His fourth ability is going to do the majority of the bossing damage whenever a boss is on the field, just because it is almost 10,000 skill power modifier. Even if you don't have all of your stacks activated with Ultimate Blair, he can still be pretty useful. And if you activate all of his abilities on the ground, it will sort of slow you down. It's better to jump in the air and activate them, because whenever you are in the air and you're activating a skill, it cancels the animation that slows you down if you're walking or sprinting. But you essentially melt everything in your path in most of the game's content. And even his third ability alone does some pretty good damage. But most of the damage is actually going to be coming from the explosion of these small fireballs on your fourth ability, aside from ad. Blair is really fun, and if you're into just getting the new content, creating the new content, and beating it, I highly recommend doing that with Blair. There's definitely been worse Descendants. The Arche Tuning tree, there is a skill power section that goes to here, and then a skill cooldown section that goes to here. You will want to get these two, and this path that I've taken here is to get this skill critical hit rate point. This is really important because this skill critical hit rate is letting you get to 100% skill critical hit without putting anything on Blair. You can get really close without these 3 nodes anyway, but this is just going to help you get there without too much trouble. And then you'll also want these 2 leftovers, the skill effect ranges. If you don't have 40 levels for your Blair, which it takes forever, I would prioritize the skill power tree over the skill cooldown tree. The Reactor, you're definitely going to want skill cooldown and skill critical hit damage. This is just going to be the best thing for Ultimate Blair, provided that you're getting to close to 100% critical hit rate. The skill cooldown, the higher you get and closer you get to 90, the bigger of the difference it will feel in your gameplay. Because if I have 85% cooldown and then I put 5% cooldown on it, that's going to decrease your cooldown by 25%. If I start at 0 and put 5%, you'll get 5% cooldown. The more you get at the end of your thing will give you better results. As far as the external components, unfortunately, Slayer's set is still the king, even with the addition of the Firebrand Auxiliary Power. The Firebrand Auxiliary Power, due to it only giving you 30% fire, you're not going to get a 30% increase in damage because of that. You'll probably get somewhere along the lines of 10% increase. If you want, you can equip the sprinting one just to run faster, but I do believe that this is a sad external component set, at least for now. At the end of the day, you just play the game how you want to, because that's all that matters. But this is my take on Ultimate Blair. I am back. I'll be trying to be as consistent as possible in future content. I'm doing Wilds and in tandem with The First Descendant. So if you're interested in that, you can check me out on Twitch. I do all of my gameplay on live and most of my testing, and every now and then I'll record a video on there. Y'all have a sick day. Peace out.